So, welcome to Adventures Out There. I'm your host, Ness K, and we're going to do another video um, launching into some of the content of this channel that I promised you in my intro. Hope my kids are in bed now, so hopefully I can do a bit of a longer video for you. So, today I want to talk about RPGs in general. So, RPG stands for role-playing game. I've played a number of different ones. I've played RPGs that are tabletop. So what that means is that we all gather here around a table and we roll dice and we participate in a collaborative story. I've also participated in role-playing games that were LARP, which stands for live action role-playing. Live action role-playing means that you go to a designated space, you dress up in a costume as your character, there's props and setting and music. It is a completely role-play immersive experience for the duration of the game. Ideally, you are your character, and the setting is the setting in the game world, and you still have your mechanics aspect. The LARPs that I've played use rock, paper, scissors, or the D10 system. So you Chronicles of Darkness and World of Darkness are the two styles that I've played. You also have Nordic LARPs and a variety of other different kinds that I've never even touched, but would love to experience because I like to try new things. So that is kind of a Disney definition of what an RPG is, which is great and fun and exciting. So, the next thing that we're going to talk about with regards to RPGs is why would I want to spend my time sitting around a table playing a board game, a tabletop? Why would I ever want to do that? Because it's awesome, is clearly the answer here. And here's why. When you watch a movie, you are having a passive experience of a story. You are watching a story unfold before you. Same with watching a TV show or reading a book. Those experiences are the author has written a script, the actors have orchestrated that script, and you are experiencing as an audience. Which is all great and awesome and cool and a totally fun way to be entertained. Love movies. RPGs are like a TV show that you are inside. You get to be one of the characters. You get to be Captain Marvel. You get to be Jon Snow. You get to be the center of attention. You get to be Captain Picard. You get to be in the center of the action. Luke Skywalker. There are a plethora of role-playing games in a whole bunch of different settings, spanning anywhere from science fiction to modern to post-apocalyptic to cataclysmic settings to medieval settings to fantasy settings. There's a whole plethora of things to choose from in terms of genre, just like when you want to choose your television show. So the first step to finding a role-playing game that's right for you is picking your genre. So thinking to yourself, what is my favorite thing to experience in terms of stories that I like to watch or read? So if you really like science fiction, you might be happier with something like Shadowrun or Star Trek or Star Wars or Traveler. There's a whole variety of sci-fi games out there, and probably a few that I haven't even named, that you could jump into if sci-fi is your thing. If you like fantasy, there is Dungeons and Dragons, which is probably the most popular, the most famous. There's Pathfinder Society, there's Pathfinder. There is, it ran out of my brain. Conan is a Morpheus fantasy setting system. So there are, and there's a number of others that I'm kind of forgetting right now, but there's those to choose from. Or you could do something in a modern setting. There's a number of World of Darkness games that are tabletop, Chronicles of Darkness and as well as Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse. These are tabletop games taken in a modern setting. Shadowrun is another really famous, really popular one. Then there's some post-apocalyptic games like Rift's Earth, which is by Palladium. So there are a number of different games you could do. There are also role-playing games based around fandoms. There's a Doctor Who role-playing game, there's a Firefly role-playing game, there's a Star Wars role-playing game, there's a Star Trek role-playing game. There's a Firefly role-playing game. There are Tales of Equestria, as you saw in one of my other videos, is another role-playing game that is available. So there are tons of options out there for your wanting to get into tabletop. Now, some of them are a lot easier to get into than others. So the second part of choosing an RP that is right for you, role-playing RPG, role-playing game that's right for you, is deciding how complicated you want to be in terms of the way the system runs. So the mechanics of a system. So what I mean when I say that is, what dice do you roll? How many do you roll? How often do you roll? How easy is it to figure out which dice you're supposed to roll? How easy is it to figure out your character sheet, your character's like list of skills and abilities and disciplines and whatnot? How easy is that to negotiate for you? Do you like a lot of options in your mechanics? So do you like a character sheet with like 50 skills? Or do you prefer something really, really simple and streamlined where you have more like 10 skills to choose from? So deciding whether you really like complicated mechanics or simple ones is important for deciding which game is going to be for you. And we'll maybe get into some of that more in a like side-by-side comparison video later on in my series. But for now, we're talking about kind of ways you can choose. So one of the ways that you can do that is by looking at one of the source books. I have a couple right here. The Player's Handbook is usually going to tell you everything that you need to know about how to build a character and kind of give you an outline of what it is that you have to do. If you find character creation really overwhelming as you're reading through the book, you might want to look at a different system to see if character creation is simpler in some of the other role-playing game systems. Because if you're struggling a little bit with character creation, you might struggle a little bit with the mechanics of the game. That being said, it is always wonderful to check in with the gaming community if you're interested in this particular setting and being like, hey, I wanted to play this game. Is there any chance you could show me how it works or help me build a character? And most of the gamers I met are super nice and will totally be more than happy to help show you how things work and how things fit together and help you make a character and sort of give you an overview of how things come together. So, that being said, the next step is to remember role-playing games are fun. They're entertainment, right? So be sure that you're playing with the people that you enjoy the company of, even if they're a bunch of strangers. You're going to come together and play this game for a few hours. So one of the really important things is to make fun your top priority, and not just fun for you, fun for everybody at the table. The GM should be having fun, the game master. The players should be having fun. Everybody at that table should be having a really good time when we're playing our game, when we're in the story. So if someone is struggling or seems to be not having fun, sometimes it's a good idea to step back, kind of figure out a way to make the game more fun for them. As a player, I've tried really to do this by sharing plots. So if my character gets some information or gets like we call them plot cookies, so get like a little breadcrumb or what have you to go to that's going to lead us on our next adventure, I make sure that I share it with the party so that everybody feels involved. Also, that's one way to do it and bring everybody in. The other thing that I try to do is, as a GM on that side of the screen, I try really hard to make sure that all of my games have differing things that I do. So, as an example, I don't do the same thing. Like, we don't always go into the cave, fight the monster. It's not all combat, 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 combat. Combat is an important part of an RPG. Rolling the dice is an important part of the RPG, but there are roles in a party, and the fighting role is not always the primary role. So you want to have stuff for your combat people to do, but you also have people who build characters like bards or rogues, or, you know, and you want to give them a chance to shine, to do things that are sneaky, disable traps, have to like convince someone to do something. So it's really important to make sure as a GM that you structure your game in such a way that you have some social games and that you have some dungeon delves and combat games, and that you kind of try and switch up the requirements of a task so that some of the non-combat people have a chance to shine. So give everybody a chance to have the spotlight now and again. In the interest of that, sometimes when I rotate the spotlight, and I've met a lot of other GMs that I love to game with that do the same thing, whereby each character in the party eventually has sort of their own episode, if you will, of the RPG game. So they end up with a story arc, or a small story arc that is centered around them. This is really awesome. You can use things like side quests, like the bard gets a message from home that he has to go home right away. His sister's sick and his mother's been kidnapped, and the party needs to help him get his family back. And you can orchestrate that adventure to somehow weave into your meta plot, your main arc, and but it's an adventure that's focused around that character and that character's stories and that character's relationships. And it can really help players, especially players that are shy around the table, that don't like to get in there and aren't terribly vocal. Having a spotlight kind of migrate around the table like that can really help those players feel like they get a chance to shine. So that's sort of where I'm at, which leads me into my next point, which is about RPGs in general, which is why roleplay instead of watching TV, because you're in the story, and the story is key. And one of the most interesting and wonderful things I love about role-playing games is that you never have the same one twice. Even if two different groups are playing the same pre-made module or pre-made campaign, they're going to have completely different experiences because the characters are going to be different, and those characters are going to bring different decision-making processes, and those decision-making processes are going to lead to an entirely different story than another group. And as such, the collaborative storytelling aspect is just makes for a very social binding experience. We together collectively do this, and in a world where we're so distant from one another a lot of the times, it's a really awesome experience to put away everything else and get lost in a really good story. So that is my opening shot, if you will, on RPGs and why I love them and how to maybe help you select your own. So I hope you found the video informative, and I hope there's more to come. Anyway, have a good night. Remember, adventure is out there. Cheers.